Hi everyone, my name's Declan McGlynn. Welcome to Friday Forum Live, Point Blank's weekly broadcast bringing you exclusive tutorials, artist interviews and industry insight every Friday live from East London. Today we're joined by Head of School JC Concado for a live music production Q&A. All right, so we're joined by JC Concado to take your questions on mixing, mastering, and music making. Get your questions in the comments below or to the side, and we'll get to them throughout the broadcast. And if you want to learn more about mixing, mastering, and all those types of things, so make sure you check out our courses, both here in London and online at pointblanklondon.com. JC, welcome back.
Welcome back.
In the layer again.
In here again.
So, you know, the reason we decided to do this, I guess, was because we do a lot of Friday forums, and at the end, there's like, everyone's asking loads of questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
We run out of time.
Sometimes we run out of time. Yeah, we're building a momentum.
So we wanted to do one that was just
questions live, and you know.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a bit of free for all, but that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
So
that's how we like
let's just get straight into it. We started out asking you guys over the past week, get your questions in, and we've had some really good ones. Starting with Katie Ogden, who asked on Facebook about multiband compression.
Okay.
And, just kind of like how it works, why would you want to use it, the benefits
of it, etc.
Exactly.
I mean, so basically, very, very quickly, a multiband compressor, think of it as a compressor for a defined band, a frequency band. Mm-hmm. So a single band compressor reacts to the entire frequency spectrum. The problem with that can be that sometimes if something might trigger that compressor and affect other parts in the spectrum, typically kick drum. Right. And it's not unusual that even single band compressor may have some sort of sidechain or filter to try to attenuate the kick drum so that the kick drum doesn't trigger the compressor first and duck everything else. For me, I'm a big fan of single band compressors because they tell me if something actually is, maybe there's a bit too much kick, and it makes me think about it. Now, it's not the case for every type of music. You know, if you think of hip hop, for example, but also in a mastering situation, you've given a mix, then you may have to fix a problem where the kick is too loud and it triggers, it does that thing that happens. That's where multiband, for me, I see multiband as a rescuing tool, fixing tool. It's not the first tool I would go to. Mm-hmm. I just want to clarify that. But it's a personal take on it. I know a lot of people are using multiband, swear by it, and if it sounds good, it's totally legit. You know, I've got no issue with that. But I know that it's used extensively in mastering, especially hip-hop and stuff like that. That's how you get that kind of loud level. By definition, hip-hop has very loud kicks, etc. So that allows you to put that in. So I've got a couple of examples that we can look at. Okay, I mean, first of all, I mean, if you look into the course, we talk about multiband compressor on our courses, going through what is a multiband compressor, how it's here, obviously word of caution always, tuning the bands, and then a few examples. So we've got quite a lot of content on how to deal with those issues. Yeah. So one of them, we've taken a mix here. It's kind of a pop song, singer-songwriter. The mix
All right, so sorry about that. Technical difficulties happens. We are live after all.
Absolutely.
So we were looking at multiband compression and why or why not you might want to use it.
Yes, absolutely. So we've discussed basically a single band compressor compresses over the whole frequency range.
Yeah.
So what may happen is you may have an element that starts, typically it would be a kick drum, for example, that may start getting the compressor to react first, therefore compressing everything else. If the kick is a bit too loud in your mix, that may start making your mix a little bit dull, laughless, because compressor can do that in the top end, starting to make things a little bit duller.
Right.
So many single compressors, some, not many, but some single band compressor have some sort of a high pass to try to eliminate that problem. But this is where typically a multiband could work really, really well, where you would only compress the kick without compressing the rest of it.
Right.
Multiband being a compressor for a defined frequency range. Okay? So that's the concept of it.
Okay.
So let's have a look at this mix, for example. We've got a mix here. It's a pop song. It's got a little bit too much kick drum. I mean, you can see it even on the metering here. Every time the kick is kicking, this is really where we've got too much label. Now, if we're looking here at the multimeter here, also seeing it's the kick, the loudest part. And what I've done is I've set up a single band compressor here, a C1 wave, just because it's quite fast, so I wanted something that reacts really fast. And I've set it up quite badly on purpose to show what's happening when the kick is triggering everything else too much. Every time you put on the kick, the vocal, everything ducks. So obviously,
which for like a live kind of aesthetic, like
you don't want that. I mean, it may work on some electronic music and things like that, but or rock even, where you want a bit of that pumping effect. It's part of the sound. But there are times where a multiband may be useful. I mean, I've got to say again, but a multiband for me, I see it more as a fixing tool rather than a go-to. However, there are style of music like hip-hop, where the kick is meant to be loud. You tend to mix them super loud, maybe a bit too much. You tend to put a bit too much of kick and bass when you mix hip-hop. I think it's part of what you're trying to achieve. And then the multiband is used extensively in mastering hip-hop in America and stuff. They're all using pretty much that. So a couple of examples to show you how we can deal with that. Mm-hmm. So here, typically a single band compressor is not quite doing the trick because of the kick. So what I would use instead is a perfect example to use a multiband. Now there are lots of different multiband. Again, I'm putting up the waves. I've got to say I quite like it, that one. And I know waves is getting quite a bit of stick, sometimes on YouTube just because, it's old, etc. But it's kind of like, well, not just on YouTube, Yeah, they are older, but they still make, decent plugins. What I like about that one is the fact that it's linear. Again, as soon as you deal with different bands, you're going to introduce some sort of delay shift throughout each band. So having a linear phase multiband compressor is going to give you a more transparent, I think, especially if you start applying it over a whole mix. One of the things that is different on the wave multiband is the range. Instead of having a ratio, you have a range, and you set a range as dB. So if I set a range of, let's say, 5 dB here, and if I were to bring the threshold fully, and let's do it here, threshold out there. And I'm going to bring the threshold right down. Yeah. You see, I've brought the threshold right down. What's happening? It's compressing. Like, totally, you would never do that. I'm compressing far too much. But you noticed here, it doesn't reduce more than 5 dB. Because that's the range I've set. So instead of having a ratio, it's a range. So now, it's compressing constantly. You see, it's not moving at all, at but 5 dB. And that gives an interesting approach, I think, to multiband, in my opinion. So obviously, let's bring that right back up. Now it's obviously moving. But you see the difference?
Yeah.
It couldn't.
It's safer.
It's safer, exactly. So now what we've done with the multiband have different things. Actually, yes. Multiband basically here, what we've done is we've brought down the kick, those frequency, but it doesn't affect the top end so much. If you listen to it now compared to before, you see, I can bring the threshold of the individual bands, so they're not getting affected as much. So the kick which is in that range, I'm going to bring the threshold down. You see, we're really getting the kick, but it's not affecting the rest of it. So it's quite transparent. On top of it, you could even bypass certain bands that you don't want to be affected at all. So let's make the kind of mid band here, and also this one, the top end. I'm compressing now the snare, because I think the snare is a bit poking as well. I'm bringing here, but I'm not compressing the rest of it. The result, if you compare that, there's no top end. That has preserved the top end.
Right.
So that's kind of a typical, quite transparent
Like a subtle way
use of, and I'm using only three bands here, targeting some of the bands that I wanted to. The low mid, the bottom end, and the snare, without affecting too much the cymbal and other stuff. And I went easy on the snare because I didn't want to start squashing the vocal, otherwise I would get back to the single band.
Yeah, exactly. So this is like a transparent way. Is there maybe like a more extreme way?
Yeah.
You could use multiband if
yes.
you wanted to.
Absolutely. Well, I think we talked about hip-hop mixes and stuff, and I think
Yeah.
that would be a typical example. So I'm going to here, okay, so here is a kind of remix I've done for Portishead quite a long time ago. And we were in the studio all night, so we didn't have time to mix it. We literally mixed it in an hour because we spent the whole day recording parts and just writing it. So literally an hour from 9 to 10 in the morning after having worked all day is not the best time to mix. So this mix is really not a great mix. That's the reality of it. And I thought that would be a perfect example to show. So I'm going to play quickly some of the track without anything, and you're going to see the problem. This one is more, the bass is really pokey, not really.
We suffer every day.
No top end. Yes, we're going, you know, it's a bit not quite.
Yeah.
There's a bit of pop in the mid, in the low mid. It's not a great mix, basically. To the point where, on that one, I think there's quite a bit of a cut to be done in that area, 110. So straight away, let's see. You see that there was a big pop.
Yeah, very resonant.
There's a big resonance.
Yeah.
So I had to treat the resonance. We had to treat the resonance straight away before even going anywhere, I think, on that track. Otherwise, the compressor would just pick up on that, and it's just a bad resonance, basically. But here is an example of a slightly more heavy-handed use of multiband, as you can see. Let's put it on and let's have a listen to compare.
We suffer every day. What is it for? These crowns of illusion
That's without.
are fooling us all. And now I am weary.
Quite a big difference. But
That's a heavy use.
You know, when you're A-Bing it, it's drastic. But if you've never heard the original version, that doesn't sound particularly overcompressed.
No. But what we've done, I mean, see here, we're getting some compression of up to 6 in some places here. Look at that. We're getting up to 6 dB reduction here. But what we've done here is also use one of the advantage of multiband, which is touching on EQ as well. If you look at the gain makeup, you know, a compressor has a makeup gain. You compress, and you may want to bring up the level a little bit. So here we've used the gain makeup as an EQ. So we've boosted this frequency range here by 6 dB, this one by 3, this one by 0.8. So we have shape up. We're doing EQ as well as compressor here. And that's why we're getting that kind of
Who can tear me apart? And it's on.
so that's kind of heavy use. It feels quite compressed, but in a nice way, you know, and it has done the trick, I think.
Yeah, very quickly as well.
Yeah.
So that's a good example of.
That's a good example. I mean, one of the reasons there was a lot of resonance that we didn't have time to deal with was it's all sample based. That's one pretty much.
Okay.
With a drum beat from Sesame Street.
Nice one. Sesame Street.
Yeah, it is actually.
Cool. So thanks, Katie, for that question from Facebook. We got another question from Jason Gibbons, which is also on Facebook, asking Oh, actually, this was on YouTube. Asking about stereo widening and multiband again. We have multiband today.
Okay.
So basically, he's asking.
Again, we've looked at that. So again, I don't use. I'm not going to pretend. I use Ozone. I haven't had a chance yet to get into it. And,
Okay, so
but I've heard really, really good things about lots of part of.
Yeah, and actually, if you
Ozone
do
does.
want to know more about it, we did a Friday Forum.
And
on it.
Anthony did an FFL
a couple
that
weeks
was
ago,
really,
so
really
check
good.
that one out.
So you may want to check that. But I mean, basically, again, the concept is very similar. So we downloaded a demo. So we are just getting a demo. So after 10 seconds, you may get some silence or noise. I'm not sure.
So just to read out the full question so that we can find out what it is. Jason's asking, please could you explain how multiband stereo wideners like
So
isotopes
again,
work?
that's the same concept, Instead of having a widener doing it over the whole frequency, you suddenly are able to process certain frequency more than others, or only a certain frequency and not the others. It's always, multiband is, I think you need to be clear about what it is. It's not as complicated as we feel it is. If you understand the concept, then think of it as suddenly you do it over several bands instead of across the whole band, giving you a little bit more control. But as always, the downside to it is if you start doing it too much, you're starting affecting the phase a little bit and unbalance things, and you can really ruin things. So be very careful, especially with widening, I think. Multiband widening, I think suddenly you can really do some weird stuff to the phase, I think. So let's have a listen. Let's have a look at the Ozone. We've got this kind of EDM track. So as I said, it was a demo. I just downloaded it very quickly, and that's the Ozone imager. So again, it's a 4-band by the look of it, and you can activate certain bands or deactivate others. So, I mean, for those of you who have seen other FFL, we've talked about widening mono stereo, for example, last week. I wouldn't recommend going crazy on widening the bottom end. It probably would be against everything we've said so far. But basically here, here it's in the middle, and you can narrow or put some width, widen. So the bass, you could argue straight away, the idea would be to probably make it a bit more mono. But let's have a track. Listen to the track. It's a big EDM track, but I think it's a little bit too mono on that one. You've got that. I mean, typically we've talked about it. EDM is one of those styles where everything is super wide, and that actually is probably not enough. I know I'm always preach about not go too crazy on that, but that needs at least some stuff happening to make it more exciting. More. That's part of the sound, So let's activate it. What's great about Isotope is I can see they've got lots of different tools, so you can always keep an eye on your correlation, phase relationship, and all that kind of stuff. You can see here it's going slightly, here it's good. The relation is, I don't know, it's really mono compatible, so it's great. And you can check in mono as well. So the idea is you can basically pick a band and widen it. So in this one, I would say the top end definitely could go widening, and maybe we could bring it down a little bit. So you select the band here. And I'm going to deactivate just to see the difference. Yeah. You hear, and it's only on the top end of the synth, not affecting the rest of it. Let's mono. Still mono compatible, still pretty good. You see, we see it's a bit wider. You can almost see it a little bit here. You see it? A little bit? Now we could go a little bit more here as well, the snare and clap. And it's becoming pretty wide, pretty wider. But let's see what it does in mono. Have you noticed what's happening on the clap here? There's something, the clap is, the whole top end of the claps in mono starting to disappear, especially if you start doing that. I mean, let's go crazy just to illustrate that. You see all those frequencies in that region, you really hear them? Let's solo it. All that stuff. It's there in stereo, but I put it mono, and it's nearly all gone.
So again, more subtle use probably a better idea.
You see? You hear it? Something, so you've got to be careful, I think. So ideally on this track, I probably would do something like this. And even maybe here, I would put my bass, let's say from about 120 here, make it more mono. Now, by making that the bass mono, I think the top end also appears wider, because only it's in relationship, you're getting that kind of triangle, upside down triangle. Have a listen now, compare. It's wider. What we've lost is a bit of power as well, but actually it's wide. Yeah.
So if you
So
didn't
that's
know-
multiband compressor, imager or widener or whatever you want to call it. But yeah.
Cool. So if you didn't have isotope, would you have any like recommendations for how you would widen something? Not necessarily multiband, but just because actually this leads on to the next question.
Yeah, I probably would. I would use again, but I would use mid-side. You know, maybe like something like center from Waves is pretty good. I quite like it. It's simple, but it's not multiband.
Yeah, because Andrew, he just asked a question. Andrew Reynoldson is asking, please could you give an example of how to use the Haas effect? So maybe we could just touch on that quickly, because it's quite similar kind of.
Yeah, but we don't have an individual project. As effect, I wouldn't use it on the whole mix at all.
Right.
No way. But I would do maybe on a synth, and the idea is you pan it. You pan, again, mono signal. Let's say you've got a mono guitar. Let's take a typical example where you would use it. Mono guitar, I pan it on one side, not hard pan, maybe let's say 9, 10 o'clock, roughly. I mean, I could recreate here, but it wouldn't make sense in terms of sound because it won't sound very good. So if it was a mono signal, then I would do that. So I would send that into, let's say, a short delay, for example. I've done a video on that anyway. I think we've done an FFL on where I'm dealing with Haas effects quite in depth. So let's say I would have some sort of a very simple delay here, but again I would use it mono. So it would be a mono delay, and I would take off the sync, and I would use something along the side of, you know, very short, maybe 20, 30, that kind of really, really small millisecond, probably very little feedback or none at all actually, and then have that completely panned that way, for example, and that would straight away give you, I mean obviously it's a track so it's not.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just a way of widening.
Exactly, and you see straight away it feels wider, you know. Obviously it's a full mix, I wouldn't do it on a full mix, but that's the idea, very, very briefly.
Cool. So I'll just keep the questions coming.
Yeah.
Sean Cusick, this is on Facebook, is asking the best tips for 808s and using them for bass lines, but keeping them sounding big and warm in a track.
The key is going to be to have them, I think 808 bass notes have notes that are more powerful than others. So I think that one of the big tricks is going to be to kind of even that out so it comes across, so you don't have notes disappearing and others really booming. So some sort of consistency. So it's going to be a key of targeting notes. So you know, with your EQ, any notes played has a frequency related to that. That's the relationship that you have between pitch and frequency. A, middle A being 442 hertz. So based on that, certain notes you can target with quite narrow Q and bring down the volume of that special note, and you can emphasize that.
Yeah, we actually looked at exactly that in the sub bass.
Yes,
FFL,
absolutely. So that would be that and a combination of EQ.
And would you say that, because obviously everyone is making 808 emulations, 808 sample packs, it comes with every single sample pack you can get pretty much.
Yeah.
Would you recommend using a sampled 808 kick or a synthesized one? If you're pitching them a lot?
If you're pitching them a lot, I would probably go with a synthesized one because it's going to react better to the pitch. I mean, a sample, unless it has been sampled at different pitch, eventually out of its natural range, it's going to become sounding a bit weird, I think. Like an octave lower, for example, it's going to sound probably wrong. not that great.
Yeah.
It's going to sound like something that's been pitched down, basically.
So it'll
instead
keep
of-
its tone better if it's
Yeah,
synthesized.
I think so. I think so. But again, it depends.
And in terms of compression, would you, because obviously using EQ,
Combination of EQ and compression.
Okay.
Yeah, both of them too. I mean, compressor is more about, like I went on the sub bass, it's about tightening up. It's about really tightening up, and the bottom end has the bigger the bottom end, the more I think it needs to be tightened up. Otherwise, you'll start getting those to jump out a bit too much.
right, cool.
Therefore, unbalance and distorting and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So, good question here from Audio Trip, who's asking subtractive EQ. When you talk about bad frequencies, how would you define what what bad frequency is?
Okay.
Is it something that doesn't belong in the musical context or too much of a particular frequency?
You've got to trust your ear. When you hear that the mix, there's something is not balanced, it's a bit dull. Maybe we can go back to one of the previous example. Maybe I'll take the Portishead, for example. I think it's quite a good example. And let's do that. And let's do that. So I'm hearing that and I'm thinking, okay, it's not really, there's nothing going on in the top end, and I need that. Gives me that kind of clarity that I need, and kind of like getting me into the mix. If it's too dull, mix a bit kind of like when you react to it in a dull way, if it makes sense. But I would go, the typical trick is always to boost. I'm looking, so I'm gonna go across. I'm boosting a bit. Don't boost too much, because the danger is that suddenly you're getting self-oscillator. If you boost too much, and everything's gonna sound bad if you're boosting too much. So it's a key of not boosting too much, and then moving across your frequency to see which one is the offending one. Suddenly you're gonna be like, oh wow, okay. So let's do that. Okay, I would say that one is one. Yeah, there's a bit of resonance on it that's been created. It's, you know what I mean? It's not. It's more than just a boost of. You can hear an actual resonance.
Just a dream. We've crashed
And obviously here as well.
Yeah.
And you hear even by 10 hertz less. It's so we cut that and straight away. But then there was another one at 210, so you could also go there. And it's not a hazard that this one is there as well, because it's the octave above that one.
Yeah. So once you reduce that one,
It's not-
fundamental.
Yeah. So you see here, it's about rebalancing again. Straight away. So you see, I've isolated those. That's the
Yeah.
way.
So bad frequencies are essentially anything that makes something unbalanced.
Unbalanced, but also resonance, I think. Resonating. I think resonance is, for me, is the key, suddenly. And there are sounds that where you expect resonance to be there, but you may need to tame them a little bit.
Yeah.
Here it was the bass and the kick, the combination of them together. As soon as you boost a little bit, it became boo, as if you had kind of quite a lot of resonance on the filter.
Yeah.
Synth, and that is telling that it's kind of like, now something needs to be addressed here.
And then when you compress after that, it'll be much more effective.
Yeah. Everything.
Cool. So NXCVX has asked if maybe we could look into like swing and the concept of groove and that kind of thing.
Okay, oh wow. Yeah, I've done, again, we did quite a couple on those, I think, on grooves and stuff like that. And swing is everything that it's every alternate 16th note or every alternate 8th. It's the idea that you make the beat, you make the note closer to the next one. That's a definition of swing in the context of quantize, obviously. So for something to swing, it has to be, the key with instrumentation, he's talking about melody, isn't he?
Yeah,
or she.
exactly, yeah.
So I think it's about, again, it has to look with other thing, either against something or with something. So,
Right.
And I think the question was in relation to a 4/4 kind of
just
rhythm track. So obviously the 4 on the 4 is dead on the beat, but then you're getting some swing going against it. So it's got to work. It's hard to to explain that, but it's you've got the kick making your foundation,
Yeah.
and then usually the melodies has to work. Typically in house or dance electronic music, so often the swing is going to be shown on percussion, on hi-hats. That's where the swing is going to be. So if you're going to write a melody, make sure that it's kind of locking with that. They're swinging obviously together,
Yeah.
and that will be more important.
Sometimes you'll mute the kick and the hats will seem way out.
Yeah.
And when you drop it back in,
Absolutely.
it's swinging, and
Yeah.
vice versa, where
totally.
the kick is completely rigid, but then the
Yeah.
kick feels groovy in comparison. So
Exactly.
it's
It's
important to
always
keep like a root
Totally.
for
It's-
everything
yeah,
to swing off. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and another one is don't chop your samples exactly in the transient.
Not necessarily, I mean,
Yeah.
depending what the effect you want to have after that. But we discussed we will be doing one on maybe using samples and going back into the concept of groove, maybe a little bit and stuff.
Yeah, that's a future FFL.
That's a future FFL, indeed.
Yeah, cool. So he's also asked if we can quickly go over maximizing and
Well-
what maximizing does.
Well, I mean, my understanding of maximizing is a bit the kind of what you do with a limiter anyway.
Right.
Except that some maximizer, for example, we don't have it here, but it's the Sonox one, which it's called the inflator. And it's about maximizing. The idea of normally limiting is you stop the high levels, you stop them going above. So by that, you're bringing up the low level because you suddenly be able to turn up things a bit more. Maximizing is without it. Usually, I think that's my understanding of it, and somebody may say you're absolutely wrong. So I'm gonna expose myself. Not in that sense.
Not until after the watershed.
But it's basically the low level.
Okay, cool.
So in a mix with a maximizer, it's my understanding of it is about bringing up the low level a little bit more. You're making the whole tracks a little bit more dense. You're bringing
Right.
a bit of density to
Yeah.
it. That would be my understanding of how a maximizer is working. But otherwise, maximizer is effectively, you stop that going there so you can push it louder. That's what a limiter does,
Yeah.
but in part. But there is way, again, it's a one way to get louder mixes, where I use the inflator a fair bit at home, in combination with a limiter. And I noticed that using that a little bit means that I can do less limiting. So less of that peak reduction, bringing up, especially on tracks that needs to bring up a bit of density.
Yeah.
You know, there are tracks that are maybe feel a bit sparse. The low level are just a bit too quiet, so you need to fill up the
noise floor.
Yeah.
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 Cool. So I'm going to give you some quick fire ones because we are running out of time, and there's plenty coming in. There's a good one here on RMS. Where are you? Too many questions. Joseph Wilk is asking, in what situation would you choose RMS compression versus peak compression? So root mean square compression.
Okay. I'm a big fan of RMS compression myself.
Yeah, it's more subtle.
It's a bit more subtle, it's a bit more musical. But there are times where I would use a peak. Well, a peak, actually, I could use it if I wanted to target something specifically that's poking out too much for a very brief moment. Like a kick in the other track. I could maybe just get into that quick. Let's try something quickly. Let's take that example again here, and I'm gonna do that one here. So here, I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna do a very short release, a very fast attack. So effectively, I'm in a big mode, really, if I work that way. You see here? I'm only targeting the kick quite subtly. You see here?
Yeah.
And that's the way you're keeping that in a little bit. So that's a typical example how I would use a peak, probably. Something that I need to attenuate a little bit that I can't do with EQ because I'm losing the tone. So I would try that kind of like fast attack, fast release to just target those particular things. But otherwise, I tend to use myself. I mean, by definition, a lot of people say, peak, you should use peak with percussion because it's faster. But it depends what you want to do with it. Do you want to shape the transient? Do you want to bring more attack? In which case, I find RMS more effective too for that.
Yeah, cool. So we got more That's NXCVX again. He loves asking questions. He's asking, how does saturation complement the mix very quickly, I guess?
Complement.
Yeah.
In
generates
terms of
harmonics.
improve it or
Yeah, complement.
saturation, so we're talking harmonic distortion,
Yeah.
that type of things. Well, it seems to, it's the nature of harmonic distortion and saturation make things a little bit warmer. So I think especially with I think we're all getting obsessed with that. What's interesting in the days of analog, I think manufacturers and people who developed high quality, high-end equipment would try to get as little harmonic distortion as possible.
Yeah.
That was the limitation of analog gear. But what it has happened is now engineers starting to really like some specific piece of equipment because of that. There's harmonic distortion and it brings the warmth. It's all about that kind of warmth. So that's what it is. I think it makes the problem many engineers and people have with digital is that the transient are exactly as they are, as they come in. And we for a long time, we were not used to hear music that way because we were music on tape, which is not a perfect medium. And one of the downsides to it was that compression of transient and stuff, but it turned out that it was quite musical in a way, and it made things a bit rounder. A very sharp transient isn't always nice. Sometimes you're like, oof, and tape seems to be dealing with that, and analog gear in general quite well. That's why we're getting this kind of revival of, now we're looking at harmonic distortion now. So more and more manufacturers bring back harmonic distortion in their plugin, whereas hardware people used to try to minimize it. It's
Right.
kind of
Yeah.
ironic. But that's what it does. I think it makes, distortion works a bit like a compressor as well. It makes things a bit, you round off, you square off. So if you think of something like that, suddenly you're kind of shoving off the top of it, it's becoming a bit rounder.
Yeah.
If that's the analogy I would use.
Cool. So hopefully that answers your question. There's two questions here that are directly related to the FFL we did last week.
Okay.
So I would recommend watching that, which is, where are we? Will Easton's asking, could you go over mono and stereo and how different a track should sound when played in mono? But we touched on that for like 40 minutes last week. So
yeah, I mean,
watch that video.
And I think I've illustrated it as well with the previous one on the widening. You're going to have a massive change between when you play your track in mono and stereo. What you don't want is that the key elements of your track suddenly are being widely affected in mono, because otherwise, played in a club, you think your track sounds away, and suddenly you're like, oh wow, like before the clap had disappeared, it wasn't the same clap anymore. Yeah. Things like that, and then suddenly you're like, where your mix is effectively way too different than what it used to be. And that, for me, is why you need to check it, I was reading some, quickly this morning when we went, I was researching a little bit multiband widener because I don't use them. So I did a search and there was a discussion on gear slots, and one guy was like, well, nobody listens to mono anymore. And, I've mentioned that before. Well, no, most clubs are in mono. DAB, digital radio, are in mono. All those new funky design devices are mono. So the importance of mono compatibility is still there. Yeah,
exactly. And NXCVX again says, does panning sounds to the left or to the right clear headroom for other sounds, i.e. replace EQing, which we touched on last week?
Yeah, I mean, well. I know, there's different school of sound. People could say, well, you should put everything in the middle and EQ so you get a better separation. But there's another school of thought, which is, well, if you put a sound on one side and another on the other side, and suddenly you're not getting that kind of big clash, and it still works, that means you're EQing less. And the idea, and it's valid in analog, the idea that in analog we used to do less because the more you do, the more noise you bring, the more things you patch in the insert in the pathway. If we talk really like, let's be pure about sound. That's what happened, But it's the same with digital. The more you do to stuff, it's moving the 0 and 1s more and more, and you're effectively, audiophile would say you're degrading the audio, quality of audio. So again, the idea is the less you do, the more your audio remains as it was originally.
Yeah. Cool, nice one. So we're running out of time. Just one very quick question from Will, who's asking, does mid-side EQ affect the mono image? I guess if you're EQing the mid and side separately, then it wouldn't.
No, not too much. No, if the device is well done, and if again you're not doing crazy things that are, completely ruining your mix. It's the same with multiband. It's the same with widener. It's check how it was before. Is it really improving? And obviously the danger is the same with the limiter, you know. As soon as you put your mix louder, it seems, oh yeah, it's so much better, it's brighter, it's more in your face. Compare at the same level. Compare your limited version against the original mix, but at the same level, bring back by, you know, 6 to 9 dBs, depending on how crazy you've gone with the limiter. But roughly, we're going to say about 6 dB and check, does it really work? Does it actually sound better? Or is it just the volume that gave you this impression? And I think that's the rule that is really important. Whatever you do, compare before, compare after.
Yeah, because your readers get used to something, they get bored of it.
Yeah.
Something new seems better.
Yeah,
but isn't
totally.
essentially.
You know, and all those maximizer and widener and all those tools, you've got to be really, really careful, because the effect, our ears trick us to think that it's actually way, way better. But there are other side effects that you ignore, and then you come back to it and you're like, oh wow, actually, was it really better? You know, the more, again, we've noticed it with the widener, what it had lost is a bit of punch and directness. The punch and directness is because things are in the middle, because they are equally distributed between left and right. That's your power in your mix. So if you start putting things too much on the side and all that kind of stuff, you're losing that kind of power. So bear that in mind, I think.
Cool. So yeah, there's plenty of questions still coming in, but unfortunately we are running out of time. Do keep them coming, and we'll make sure we address them for maybe a full FFL at another time. Again, people asking about parallel compression, the old classic. We have plenty of FFLs on that, but maybe we can do another one soon.
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully you got plenty of inspiration for the weekend from that. And remember, if you've still got more questions to ask, our courses are completely interactive. And our instructors have won Grammys, worked with the likes of Kanye West, Chemical Brothers, Armin van Buuren, and many more. So if you want to pick their brains and learn mixing, mastering, and all things music making, you can find out more about our courses at pointblanklondon.com. We'll be back next Friday with another interactive FFL. We'll see you then. Cheers.